Dahlia Densmore had never seen a pool that shimmered like it had been dusted in crushed diamonds until tonight. She stood frozen at the edge of the sprawling stone terrace, clutching the thin strap of her borrowed floral sundress like it might anchor her in this glittering, otherworldly place. Beyond her, the pool stretched like a sapphire dream under twinkling fairy lights, surrounded by marble statues, sleek lounge chairs, and people who looked like they belonged on magazine covers. She didn't. And that's exactly why she was here. "You promised you'd have fun," Vanessa hissed into her ear, tugging her deeper into the party. "You said, I need to do something insane this summer, remember?" Insane, yes. But crashing a millionaire's pool party? Wearing heels that made her ankles wobble? In a dress picked from her roommate's date night stash? Dahlia's stomach curled. "I thought we were just going to peek," she whispered. "This is someone's actual house." Vanessa waved a dismissive hand. Laziel Edevane doesn't care. He throws parties bigger than music festivals and invites half of LA. Nobody checks if you're on the list. Dahlia flinched at the name. Laziel Edevane, the mysterious millionaire tech investor who had become a tabloid obsession. Some said he was ruthless. Others said he was brilliant. All she knew was that his house looked like it belonged in a Bond movie, and she was 27 years old and had spent the last 5 Friday nights eating leftover Thai food while watching documentaries about whales. Tonight, she had stepped outside her comfort zone. Way outside. Vanessa was already 10 steps ahead, dragging Dahlia toward the bar set up beside a koi pond that was somehow glowing. "Come on. One drink. Then we find a way to casually hang near the pool. Just act like you belong." The bartender didn't even blink as he handed them 2 glasses of something pink and sparkling. Dahlia took a sip. It tasted like strawberries and champagne, and something wild she couldn't name. Vanessa disappeared into a crowd of bronzed bodies and flowing sundresses, leaving Dahlia alone, balancing her drink and her nerves. She turned toward the pool, hoping to blend into the background, when someone collided into her from behind. Her heel twisted, her drink sloshed, and she tumbled backwards straight into a pair of very firm, very warm arms. She gasped, heart hammering. "I'm so sore." Her words died on her tongue. The man holding her wasn't just anyone. He was tall, lean, and devastatingly handsome, with a sharp jawline, sun-kissed skin, and eyes the exact color of that impossible blue water. He looked like he belonged on the cover of a yacht catalog. And he was smiling. "You okay?" His voice was deep, smooth, confident. She blinked.
Yeah, sorry.
"I wasn't watching where You were about to fall," he said simply, like it was no big deal that he had just caught her midair in the most cinematic way possible. "Good thing I was watching." He set her gently on her feet. Dahlia's cheeks burned. She stepped back, nearly knocking into a server carrying a tray of shrimp skewers. "Maybe I should just leave," she muttered more to herself than him. "Why would you do that?" he asked, his brow lifting slightly. "You just got here." She hesitated. "Because I don't exactly belong at a party like this." He glanced around, amused. "Most of these people don't. Half of them are trying to impress someone they think matters. The other half are pretending they don't care." She laughed softly, surprised by his honesty. "I'm Laziel, by the way." He extended a hand. Her breath caught. "You're Laziel Edevane. In the flesh." She stared at him, stunned. "Oh my God. I thought you'd be older." His grin widened. "Disappointed?" "No," she blurted. "I mean no, you're just never mind."
I'm Dahlia."
"Dahlia," he repeated, like he was testing the name. "Beautiful. Like the flower." She rolled her eyes. "Never heard that one before." He laughed. "Fair enough. So, Dahlia, who's the friend that dragged you here against your better judgment?" "Vanessa," she said. "She's somewhere over there." "Well, I'm glad she did." You're the first real person I've talked to tonight. Dahlia tilted her head. Real person. He leaned casually against a marble column. Someone who's not pitching me a business idea, asking for an autograph, or trying to get me into bed. Her cheeks flushed again. I'm definitely not doing any of those. Exactly. His eyes flicked down to her shoes. But I am worried those heels are going to kill you. She laughed despite herself. They already are. Come on, he said, holding out a hand. There's a better spot near the edge of the pool. You can sit, kick them off, and pretend we're in Italy. Despite every warning bell in her head, Dahlia took his hand. They walked together toward the quiet end of the pool, away from the music. The water shimmered beside them, moonlight dancing across its surface. She slipped off her shoes with a sigh and dipped her feet in. He sat beside her, jacket off, sleeves rolled. Somehow, he didn't look like a millionaire. He looked normal, comfortable. So, he said, glancing at her, what do you do when you're not crashing pool parties? She smiled. I work at a nonprofit. We help kids with creative programs. Art, music, writing workshops. His eyes lit up. That's amazing. It's not glamorous, she said, but I love it. He nodded. That's what matters. They talked for almost an hour. About music, travel, the fact that neither of them liked olives. It was easy, ridiculously easy. Then a loud splash broke the mood. Someone had cannonballed into the pool near the middle, sending waves toward them. Dahlia squeaked as cold water splashed up her dress. Laziel stood instantly and held out his hand again. Come on, you're soaked. She hesitated. Trust me, he said. Just for a minute. She took his hand again. He pulled her inside the house, through a hallway lined with modern art and into a private lounge with velvet couches and a bar made of marble. He grabbed a towel from a cabinet and handed it to her. Thank you, she said, dabbing at her soaked skirt. He studied her for a moment. You're different.
How?
You're not trying to impress anyone. You're not chasing anything. You're just here, yourself. She shrugged. I didn't come to impress anyone. I came because I was tired of playing it safe. He smiled at that. Good. Then silence stretched between them. Her heart thudded. She should leave. She should thank him and go back to Vanessa and find a cab. But she didn't move. He stepped closer. You really don't know how beautiful you are, do you? She swallowed hard. You don't have to say that. I didn't, he said. I wanted to. And then, without warning, he kissed her. It wasn't rushed or awkward. It was warm and sure and gentle, like he was testing the line between reality and something else. When he pulled back, she was breathless. I know this is insane, he said. But can I see you again? This was crazy. He was a millionaire with a house that looked like a luxury resort. She was a girl who still used coupons at the grocery store. But her heart said yes before her head could argue. Okay, she whispered. He smiled, and it wasn't the slick, practiced smile of someone used to getting what he wanted. It was real. Tomorrow night. I'll pick you up. Dress up. No heels unless you want to. And just like that, Dahlia Densmore, who had never done anything reckless in her life, walked back out into the night barefoot, with her heart racing and a date with Laziel Edevane. She had stepped outside her comfort zone and fallen straight into his arms. Dahlia had never been picked up by a man in a midnight blue Aston Martin before. The car pulled up to the curb outside her building exactly at 8. Not early. Not late.
Exactly.
As if time bent around Laziel Edevane's expectations. The engine purred like a satisfied predator, sleek and unapologetic under the streetlights. She hesitated for only a second before the passenger side door opened by itself. Of course it's automatic, she mumbled, smoothing the front of her silver-wrapped dress before sliding in. The interior of the car smelled like cedar and expensive cologne, his scent, she realized, as he turned toward her from the driver's seat. Tonight, Laziel wore a black shirt with the top buttons undone and a slate gray blazer, effortlessly elegant. "You look like starlight," he said, his voice low and warm. Dahlia blinked. "That's a new one." He gave a quiet chuckle. "Good. I hate being predictable." As they pulled away from the curb, she glanced back at her modest apartment building, the one with the broken buzzer and the mailboxes that never quite closed. Somehow, that world already felt distant, like she'd stepped through a portal into another version of her life. "Where are we going?" she asked, gripping the edge of the leather seat as they turned onto a wide boulevard lined with palm trees. "You'll see." The drive took them farther into the hills, past gates taller than her building, past security cameras that blinked like watchful eyes. Eventually, they stopped outside a glass and steel structure built into the hillside, lit from within like a glowing jewel. A valet stepped forward as if summoned by thought alone.
"Wait."
"This is a restaurant?" Dahlia asked, eyeing the impossibly chic facade. "It's a private club," Laziel said, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Technically members only, but I made a call." She blinked. "You're a member?"
"No."
"I own it." Before she could respond, he was already around to her side, offering his hand. She took it, and as they walked through the door, she felt eyes follow them. Not just because of him, she realized, because of her. The hostess greeted them by his name and led them through a narrow hallway lined with orchids and angular sculptures. The dining room opened like a secret, candlelit and intimate, with only a handful of tables, each one placed far apart. Their table sat near a wall of uninterrupted glass overlooking the entire city. The view was dizzying, endless. "This place is..." Dahlia trailed off, unsure how to describe it. "I thought you'd like the quiet," Laziel said, pulling out her chair. "Noise looks good in pictures, but I prefer to actually hear the person I'm with." Once seated, Dahlia reached for the menu only to find there wasn't one. He noticed. "I had the chef prepare a tasting menu. Everything's local, seasonal, and nothing you've had before." "You don't even know what I like," she said, surprised. "Not yet," he admitted, "but I plan to." One course flowed into another, delicate slices of citrus-cured fish with edible flowers, hand-rolled pasta with truffle foam, lamb so tender it fell apart under her fork. Each dish was presented like art, paired with wines she couldn't pronounce but loved anyway. And through it all, Laziel asked her questions. Not the superficial kind, but real ones. "What's something you used to love that you stopped doing?" She blinked, caught off guard. "Drawing," she said after a pause. "I used to sketch all the time, but I haven't in years." "Why'd you stop?" "I guess life got too loud. Bills. Work. Deadlines." He studied her. "That's not noise. That's static. You can't let static drown the parts of you that matter." She tilted her head. "Is that what you do? Tune out the static?" He met her gaze. "I built a life where I don't have to hear it." There was no arrogance in his tone, only fact. And somehow, that was more disarming than confidence. "Must be nice," she said, not bitter but honest. "It's isolating," he replied. "Everyone assumes you already have everything, so they stop offering anything real." She looked at him, then not the man from the headlines, or the host of the most glamorous party she had ever seen, but the man in front of her. The one who owned a restaurant but still leaned forward like her answer mattered more than the view. As dessert arrived, something involving lavender, honey, and a sugar nest, they were the only table left. The city lights below flickered like a sea of candles. Laziel glanced at her plate. "You haven't touched it." "I'm full," she said, and a little overwhelmed. "Too much." "No," she said quickly. "Not in the way you think. It's just, this is the kind of night you remember for the rest of your life, even if nothing ever comes after it." He leaned back slightly. "What if everything comes after it?" Dahlia's breath caught. Don't say that like it's easy. It's not, he said, but it's honest. She laughed softly. You don't even know what kind of mess I am. Try me. She hesitated. My father left when I was 13. My mom worked 3 jobs. I got through college on scholarships and vending machine dinners. I live paycheck to paycheck, and sometimes I get scared I'm wasting my life trying to fix things that were never mine to fix. He didn't look away. That's not a mess. That's strength. She studied him. What about you? What's your mess? He looked out the window, jaw shifting. I trusted the wrong person once. Gave him everything. Investment capital, legal access, even my friendship. He gutted my company from the inside. I spent 2 years clawing it back. I haven't trusted easily since. So why me? She asked. He turned back to her. Because you look at me like I'm just a man. Not a prize. Not a headline. Just a man. Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. She reached for her glass, but he caught her hand gently.
Come with me, he said.
They left through a side door that opened onto a private terrace. A string quartet played softly in the distance somewhere inside the club, not for them, but somehow still theirs. The city stretched endlessly below, a living constellation. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. She stared at it. What is that? He opened it slowly, revealing a silver key on a delicate chain. I designed something for you, he said. It's just a sketch right now, but it's real. A creative studio. In the city. Fully stocked. Rent-free. Yours. Her breath caught.
What? You said you stopped drawing.
I don't want you to stop anything else. She stepped back. Laziel, this is too much. It's not a bribe. Or a favor. It's a door. You choose whether or not to walk through it. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Not here.
Not now.
I don't want to be someone you rescue.
Good, he said.
I'm not looking for someone to save. I'm looking for someone to believe in. She stared at the key, heart thundering. This is insane. So, was kissing you after knowing you for 1 hour. So is thinking about you every minute since. He stepped closer. But I don't want a safe story, Dahlia. I want this one. And then he kissed her again, not tentative like the first time, but certain. Like the beginning of something neither of them could stop. When they finally pulled apart, the air between them crackled. Come home with me, he said softly. Not for tonight. For what comes after.
She didn't speak.
Just nodded. And as they drove back through the hills, the silver key nestled in her palm, Dahlia realized something. This wasn't just a story she'd remember. It was the one she was meant to live. The first time Dahlia stepped into Laziel's penthouse, it didn't feel like entering a home, it felt like crossing a threshold into a dream curated by someone who didn't believe in limits. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire space like glass arms embracing the skyline. The city glittered beyond the glass, but inside, everything was muted elegance, clean lines, warm wood accents, soft lighting that made everything glow like amber. Sculptural furniture sat like artwork in curated clusters. Music played low, something instrumental, a single piano weaving through the silence, like it had secrets to share. She hesitated just past the threshold, the silver key still looped around her wrist like a secret. Her heels clicked softly against the dark stone floor. Laziel didn't speak right away. He watched her, his expression unreadable as he loosened his blazer and tossed it over the back of a leather chair. You live in a museum, she said, finally stunned. I live in a quiet place, he said simply. The rest of the world is loud enough. She walked slowly toward the windows, drawn to the view, but even more by the feeling creeping up her spine, like this wasn't just a beautiful place, but a space carved out for someone who didn't want to be found. Do you always bring women here? She asked, not out of jealousy but curiosity.
No, he said.
Just you. The answer sat between them, heavy and intimate. He came up behind her, close but not touching. His presence was magnetic, and the silence stretched until she could feel her pulse in her fingertips. "I don't know how to be in this world," she whispered. "Yours." He stepped beside her, hands in his pockets. "Then don't try. I'm not asking you to fit into it. I'm asking you to stay exactly who you are." She turned to face him. "That studio. It's too much." "It's not a gift," he said. "It's a catalyst. You're the one who'll make something of it." She looked away, overwhelmed again by the weight of everything: his attention, his belief in her, this entire shift in gravity since the night at the pool. "You're used to people chasing you," she said. "Why are you chasing me?" He didn't flinch. "Because you're the first person who saw past what I built. You looked at me like I wasn't made of headlines and bank accounts. And because I've spent so long investing in things that make money, I forgot what it feels like to invest in something that makes me feel alive." She blinked, her breath catching. He stepped closer, finally reaching for her hand. "I haven't stopped thinking about you since that night," he said. "Not once." Before she could respond, a sudden buzzing sound broke the moment. He pulled his phone from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and frowned. "I need to take this," he said, reluctantly. "Give me 5 minutes?" She nodded. As he stepped into another room and closed the door behind him, Dahlia wandered deeper into the space, drawn by curiosity and something else, something quieter, more searching. She found herself in a hallway lined with framed sketches. Not digital prints. Pencil on paper. Some were architectural, others abstract. But all of them bore the same initials in the bottom corner, Ellie. He sketched. She hadn't expected that. Further down, a door stood ajar. Inside, a room unlike the rest of the penthouse spread before her. Unfinished, raw, with canvases stacked against the wall and a large drafting table covered in scattered charcoal pencils and ink stains. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting everything in stark contrast. She stepped inside, heart thudding. It felt like walking into someone's journal. She heard his voice behind her a few minutes later. "I was going to show you this eventually." She turned to find him leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. "This is yours?" she asked. He nodded. "My escape. I started drawing when I was a kid. Kept going. When the business got too loud, I came here." She turned back to the sketches. "Why hide this?" "Because it doesn't make money," he said. "And in my world, if it doesn't make money, it doesn't matter." She looked at him, really looked. The quiet tension in his shoulders. The way he never quite let his guard drop, even when he was being vulnerable. "I think this is the most honest part of you," she said. He stepped forward, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You make me want to be honest." The air shifted again, heavy with unspoken things. She felt the pull, stronger this time. When he kissed her, it wasn't tentative. It was a surrender, a question and an answer all in one. Later, as they sat on the floor of the studio, backs against the wall, she traced the edge of a sketch nearby with her toe. "Did you ever think about walking away from all of it?" she asked. He looked at her. "I did. Once." "What stopped you?" "I hadn't met you yet." Her chest ached in the best possible way. But before she could say anything, something inside her shifted. A small voice whispered, "This isn't sustainable. Men like him don't stay with women like you." She stood slowly. "I should go." He didn't try to stop her. "Will I see you tomorrow?" She paused at the door. "I don't know." Dahlia left the penthouse with a storm brewing in her chest. That night, she didn't sleep. Her mind spun in circles, torn between the aching warmth of his presence and the jagged fear that none of this could last. The next morning, she stood in front of the building where the studio space was supposed to be. She had barely remembered the address, but there it was, a narrow brick exterior sandwiched between a gallery and a florist. She hesitated before stepping inside. The space was real. Bright, clean, filled with potential. Supplies neatly organized. Sunlight pouring through tall windows. Her name written on a note taped to an easel. For when you're ready. She left without touching anything. The rest of the week passed in fragments. She threw herself into work, stayed late at the nonprofit, ignored Vanessa's probing questions. Laziel didn't call. He didn't need to. His absence was louder than any message. By Friday, her resolve cracked. She showed up at the studio again, this time with a worn sketch pad under her arm. She didn't text him, didn't announce anything. She just sat at the table and let herself draw for the first time in years. When she finally looked up, the sun had moved across the room, and her fingers were smudged with graphite. She didn't go home. She stayed until the city outside grew dark. When she finally did leave, she found Laziel waiting for her across the street, leaning against the door of his car. No words, no pressure. Just him. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't either," she replied. He crossed the street, slow and steady, until they were inches apart. "I don't want to scare you off," he said. "But I'm not going to pretend I don't want more." "I know," she whispered. "I can't promise I won't mess this up," he admitted. "But I can promise I'll fight like hell when I do." "Then don't mess it up," she said. He reached into his pocket. This time, it wasn't a key. It was a ring. Not flashy. Not oversized. Simple. Elegant. A single sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds, set in a smooth platinum band. Her breath caught. "I know it's fast," he said. "And I know we come from different worlds. But I don't want to waste time pretending I don't know what this is." She stared at the ring, heart pounding. "You don't have to say yes tonight," he added. "Just don't say no." She looked at him, really looked. The man who had caught her when she fell. The one who had shown her a door to herself she thought was lost. The one who had nothing to prove but everything to give. She took the ring, held it in her palm, and nodded. "I'm not saying no," she said. The relief in his eyes nearly undid her. Then he whispered, "Good, because I've never wanted anything more." Rain fell like velvet over the city, soft and steady, turning the streets into mirrors and the skyline into a blurred watercolor. Dahlia stood at the tall, arched window of the studio Laziel had given her, the one she now called hers, without hesitation, and watched the drops streak down the glass. Her sketchpad lay open on the drafting table, a half-finished concept for an upcoming youth exhibit she was curating at the nonprofit. For the first time in years, her art had a place in the world again. Behind her, the door creaked open. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. "I thought you'd be home already." Laziel's voice filled the space, low and familiar. "I lost track of time. The rain makes everything feel slower," she said, brushing graphite dust from her palms. "You didn't answer when I buzzed." "I didn't hear it." He stepped beside her, setting a paper bag on the table. "So, I brought dinner. You haven't eaten, have you?" She glanced at him, a slow smile forming. "I should be worried you know me this well." He pulled 2 small containers from the bag. Thai food, from that hole-in-the-wall place in Silver Lake she'd once mentioned in passing. She hadn't been there in years. "You remember everything, don't you?" she asked, opening the curry. "Only the things that matter," he said, handing her a fork. They ate in silence for a while, the soft patter of rain filling the room. Dahlia noticed he hadn't taken off his coat. His jaw was tight, his expression unreadable. "What happened?" she asked finally. He looked up. "I met with the board this afternoon." She set her fork down. "About the merger?" He nodded, pushing a rice container aside. "They want to go through with it. It'll triple our valuation, open new global offices. But it means stepping back. I'd be CEO in name only. You'd be giving up control." His gaze dropped to his hands. "I built this from scratch. Every line of code, every investor pitch, every sleepless night." And now they want to hand it over to a corporation that sees people as numbers. What did you tell them? I told them I needed 48 hours. Laziel. I'm not asking for advice, he said, meeting her eyes. I'm asking if you'd still want me, if I wasn't this version of me. She blinked. What version do you think I fell for? He didn't answer. She stood and crossed to him, placing her hands on either side of his face. I fell for the man who listens more than he speaks. The one who gave me a space to create without asking for anything in return. The man who still sketches when no one's watching. His shoulders relaxed under her touch. Whatever choice you make, she said, make it for yourself. Not for me, not for them. You don't owe them your soul. He wrapped his arms around her waist, holding her tightly. I don't want to be a ghost in my own life. Then don't be one, she whispered into his chest. They stayed like that until the rain softened into mist and the city lights started to break through the clouds. 2 days later, Dahlia stood backstage at the gallery space the nonprofit had rented for their youth exhibition. Her students' work filled the walls, vivid, emotional, raw creativity that pulsed with real stories. She had fought for this event, for every piece of funding, every volunteer hour, every scrap of attention from the board. She paced in her heels, nerves fluttering behind her ribs. The mayor's office had sent someone. Donors were here. Her students stood by their pieces, dressed in their best, glowing with pride. She peeked through the curtain, scanning the crowd. He wasn't there. Not yet. She turned as her boss approached, clipboard in hand. You ready to speak? As I'll ever be, Dahlia said, smoothing her dress. When she stepped onto the stage, applause swelled. She gripped the microphone with both hands, steadying her breath. Thank you all for being here tonight, she began. This isn't just an exhibit. It's a moment where young voices are not only heard, but celebrated. Where stories that don't usually make it into galleries are given the space they deserve. As she spoke, her eyes scanned the crowd instinctively. And then she saw him. Laziel stood near the back, his expression unreadable, but his presence unmistakable. He wore no suit, just a dark turtleneck and coat, and he was looking at her like she was the only thing in the room. She faltered for a half-second, then found her rhythm again. Art can't fix everything, she finished, but it can change the way we see ourselves. And sometimes, that's enough to change the world. The applause was thunderous, but all she heard was the sound of her own pulse when she stepped down and found him waiting at the edge of the curtain. You came, she said. I wouldn't have missed it. She searched his face. You made your decision. I walked away, he said quietly. From the merger. From the board. I sold my shares, kept what mattered. I'm building something smaller now. Something that works the way I believe it should. She tried to speak, but emotion caught in her throat. I want to be present, he continued. Not just successful. Not just rich. I want to build a life that includes you, not one that only has space for you at the edges. She stepped into him, her hands at his chest. You already are. I meant what I said the night I gave you that ring. I wasn't rushing. I was ready. I still am. I know, she said. I am too. They didn't kiss. Not yet. It wasn't the moment for that. Instead, he took her hand and led her to the center of the gallery, where her students' work shone under the lights. He didn't draw attention to himself. He didn't introduce himself as the man who had funded nearly half the event anonymously. He just stood beside her, listening, watching, supporting. Later that night, when the event wound down and the last guests had trickled out, they returned to the studio. Not for a dramatic celebration, not for champagne or confetti, but to sit quietly on the floor, surrounded by blank canvases and open windows. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You did the terrifying thing. So did you. I think that's what love is, she said. Two people doing terrifying things for each other. Not grand fairy tales. Just real, hard choices. I like our story better than a fairy tale, he said. Ours has ink and thunderstorms and barefoot parties. And no castles, she added. Who needs a castle when you have a rooftop studio and the woman you love? She turned to face him, her hand brushing his cheek. Say it again. I love you. She kissed him then, slow and sure, a full circle moment that tasted like rain and something forever. That weekend, they hosted a dinner together, not extravagant, just a rooftop table with string lights, candles, and the people who mattered. Vanessa was there, toasting them with tears in her eyes. Dahlia's students sent drawings. Laziel's sister flew in from New York, hugging Dahlia like she'd waited years to meet her. They didn't talk about the past. Not the parties, not the power plays, not the pressure. They talked about the future, about building something together. Not a company, not an empire, a life. And when Dahlia tucked the ring onto her finger that night finally, with full certainty it wasn't a symbol of wealth or power or some whirlwind fantasy. It was a promise, forged in realness, risk, and the kind of love that only comes when two people step outside everything they've ever known. She had crashed a millionaire's pool party on a dare. Now she stood on a rooftop, barefoot and glowing, in the arms of the man who had once caught her mid-fall and never let go. Dahlia woke to the scent of roasted coffee beans and the muted sound of jazz drifting from the kitchen. Morning light filtered through gauzy curtains that danced with the breeze from the open balcony doors, casting soft gold across the white linen sheets. She reached out instinctively, her hand brushing the warm space where Laziel had been. She sat up slowly, fingers finding the edge of the engagement ring resting snugly on her finger. It wasn't a dream. The gallery, the rooftop, his quiet, unwavering proposal. She hadn't needed fanfare. Just his eyes locked on hers when he asked her the only question that had ever felt that certain. Dahlia padded barefoot across the hardwood floor, the coolness against her skin grounding her in real moments. Laziel stood at the stove, barefoot as well, wearing a dark Henley and sweatpants, stirring something in a pan with the kind of focus most people reserved for boardroom negotiations. He glanced back when he heard her, his face softening. Morning, he said, voice still low from sleep. Smells incredible. What are you making? Caramelized peach French toast, he said, turning off the burner. With cinnamon whipped cream, if that doesn't scare you. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching him plate breakfast like he was composing a still life. You've been holding out on me. I didn't know you could cook. He handed her a plate and shrugged. I taught myself in college. I couldn't afford takeout back then, and I hated instant noodles. She smiled as she took a bite, eyes widening. Okay, this is criminally good. I have layers, Densmore. She sat at the breakfast bar while he poured 2 mugs of coffee. I spoke to my mom last night, she said, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. She wants to meet you. He arched a brow as he handed her the mug. That sounds a little like a warning. She's protective and suspicious of anything that sounds too good to be true. He pulled out the stool beside her and sat. Then I'll just have to convince her I'm very real and very boring. She's going to ask you every question under the sun. She doesn't care about your money or your reputation. She'll want to know what makes you angry. What makes you kind? I hope she asks, he said. I want her to know the version of me that exists when I'm with you. Dahlia paused, her heart catching a little at the simplicity of it. I'll warn you though, she said. She makes you help chop vegetables while she interrogates you. I'm excellent with knives. They ate and talked, each word weaving more firmly into the shared fabric of their life. No drama. No declarations. Just warmth. Later that afternoon, they walked through the small crafts fair Dahlia's nonprofit was hosting in Echo Park. Children darted between booths, laughter rising from the puppet show near the lake. Dahlia wore a soft cotton dress and flats, her fingers laced through Laziel's as they strolled past handmade jewelry and watercolor postcards. People greeted her like she was a fixture of the community, and Laziel watched every interaction with quiet admiration. "You belong here," he said as they passed a booth selling clay charms shaped like tiny books. "I think I always did," she replied. "I just stopped believing it for a while." By the time the sun dipped low and the vendors began to pack up, Dahlia had collected a small bag of art supplies donated by a local artist for the youth studio. Laziel carried the bag without hesitation, even as a little girl ran up to him and asked if he was someone famous. He crouched to her level and said, "Only to one person." Dahlia watched him through the soft haze of twilight, her chest tugging in a way that had nothing to do with nerves and everything to do with knowing. They stopped by her apartment, so she could pick up a file she'd forgotten for Monday's planning meeting. She hadn't been back since moving her essentials to the penthouse. The space felt smaller now, but not sad.
Just part of the journey.
As she searched through a crate of documents, Laziel wandered toward the bookshelf by her window. "You never mention these," he said, pulling down a pale blue sketchbook. Her breath caught. "That's from high school. I haven't opened it in years." He flipped through the pages slowly. Each one was a glimpse of a younger Dahlia, sharper lines, darker shadows, a mix of hope and uncertainty inked in pencil. "You had a voice even then. I didn't know what to do with it. You do now." He closed the book gently and placed it back on the shelf. When she turned around, he was watching her like she was the most remarkable thing he'd ever seen. They left the apartment without fanfare, locking the door behind them without needing to look back. That night, they lay on the couch in the penthouse, wrapped in a throw blanket. The windows were open, the spring breeze cool against their skin. A documentary played quietly in the background, forgotten. "Do you ever think about the party?" Dahlia asked. "The night we met?" "All the time," he said. "You were standing at the edge of everything, wearing that dress like armor. I almost left. You didn't." She sat up slightly, brushing her fingers through his hair. "What would have happened if I had?" He thought for a long moment. "I would have found you anyway. Somehow." She kissed him, then not rushed, not uncertain but deep and slow and full of everything that had grown between them. It wasn't about beginnings anymore. It was about staying. The following week, Dahlia stood in front of a packed room at the nonprofit's annual fundraiser. It had taken years to get this kind of turnout. Donors, local artists, community leaders. She wore a deep navy jumpsuit that made her feel powerful. Laziel stood in the back, hands in his pockets, watching her speak like she was the axis of his world. When the applause died down, he stepped forward, not to take the mic, but to hand her a small envelope. Inside was a letter of confirmation. The city had approved their proposal to turn an unused municipal building into a permanent art and education center run by Dahlia, funded partially by Laziel, and staffed with full-time mentors and artists. She covered her mouth, overcome. "You did this," he said quietly, just for her. "I only helped light the path." The rest of the night passed in a blur of handshakes, hugs, and champagne flutes. But Dahlia only remembered two things: the weight of that letter in her hand, and the way he held her when they finally got home. Like she was the most essential thing he'd ever known. They didn't need to rush into the next step. There was no countdown, no anxious wedding planning or ticking clocks. Just certainty, and the quiet joy of building something together. Seasons passed. Dahlia's center opened in the fall, with murals painted by her students and a ribbon-cutting ceremony that left the mayor speechless. Laziel launched a foundation, focused on funding educational programs that prioritized creativity and innovation. They worked separately but always returned to each other. At night, they shared wine and ideas sprawled on the studio floor, laughing over failed sketches and scribbled notes. They traveled. Not to escape, but to explore. A quiet cabin in the Dolomites, a street food crawl through Seoul, a week in Lisbon filled with morning markets and late-night music. And through it all, they remained exactly who they were. Two people who had found each other when neither of them was looking, who had built something real in a world obsessed with spectacle. They never needed to prove anything again. One spring evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the city turned gold beneath them, Dahlia stood on the balcony of their home, sketchpad in hand. Laziel pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her from behind. "What are you drawing?" he asked. She tilted her head against his. "Us." He looked down at the paper, just outlines so far, but unmistakably them. Not grand, not posed. Just two people sitting on the rooftop, feet touching, tea mugs between them, laughing. "It's perfect," he said. "No," she whispered. "It's real." And that was always better.